Thank you, Ashley. Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this webinar this evening to cover the topic of providing pharmacy services at a distance, including via the internet. And this is one where the GPhC team is here to share their key learnings and insights from them with regards to providing services at a distance. Thank you, Ashley. Could I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so just to introduce everyone as well, as I mentioned, the GPhC team. So first of all, let me introduce myself fully. My name is Jasmine. I'm the Head of Advice and Support Services and the Medication Safety Officer here at the NPA. And we are joined this evening by Claire Bryce-Smith, who's the Director of Insight, Intelligence and Inspection at the GPhC, as well as her colleagues Stephanie Jackson and Andrew Mikhail, who are GPhC inspectors. And they're going to talk about distance selling of medicines, the key insights and learnings from inspections, which we feel is a hugely topical area at the moment, because especially now in the last few months since the COVID pandemic started, there is more and more distance delivery of services and medicines. And this is not just pertaining to distance selling pharmacies or online pharmacies. Many bricks and mortar pharmacies are also providing services at a distance. So one of the key things that will be clarified this evening is, what do we mean when we say providing services or medicines at a distance? It's not just via the internet potentially. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the GPhC team to discuss their learnings and insights with you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Claire Bryce-Smith, and as Jasmine has said, I'm the Director of Insights, Intelligence and Inspection. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we absolutely welcome the opportunity to be able to share some of the things that we've been learning from the inspections of online pharmacies, which I think you'll find very interesting and is probably transferable to a number of different settings. So thank you for that. We're going to talk for about half an hour-ish, and then we will hopefully be able to answer some questions for you. And we're going to box and cox between the three of us and see how that goes. But before we do start, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you from the GPhC for all the hard work that you've been doing during the pandemic to ensure that members of the public and patients can receive their medicines, but actually really importantly, being one of the only healthcare providers that have actually been open to the public throughout without an appointment. So thank you for your hard work and your ongoing hard work. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to cover four things today with you. A little bit about the regulatory landscape, about who does what who the main players actually are in terms of online distance selling. We're also then going to cover our regulatory framework, and this is really just a reminder for you to set the scene about how we view distance selling pharmacies. Just to give you a little bit of insight, it's just high level. The third thing we're going to then do is move through to some more detail about those insights that we found when we've been inspecting distance selling pharmacies. And I just wanted to take this opportunity right at the start to say what we're flagging is the insights from our intelligence-led program, which means we tend to focus on the areas where we know there may well be some problems. And that's why some of the insights are quite stark, but they are nonetheless transferable and I think are interesting to everybody. So just a little bit of a caveat. It doesn't mean to say that all online distance selling is exactly the same. It just means that we're highlighting where we've identified some of the issues for your learning. And then the fourth thing we just wanted to do is take the opportunity, because we've got you, just to give you a little bit of heads up on some things that we're finding at the moment to do with codeine linctus, just to really make you aware of that. Okay, and then time for any questions. So next slide, please. So in terms of this regulatory landscape, it can probably feel that there's loads of people who are actually looking at you and responsible for regulating. And there is quite a few, but we all have very distinct remits. So just as a very brief reminder, because I'm sure most of you know this, we obviously are the regulator for pharmacy. That's pharmacy professionals as well as the pharmacy premises, those registered pharmacies with us. We are actually the only healthcare regulator who actually does both the professionals, but also where the professionals work if they're in a community pharmacy setting. And we do actually cover England, Scotland, and Wales. So the next player, if you like, in this field is the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. And their remit is to actually look at medicines and devices. So we're the pharmacies and the professionals. They're actually the medicines and devices regulator, and they cover England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. And then what we have next to that is therefore the systems regulators in England, Scotland and Wales. So you'll be more than familiar with the Care Quality Commission, but there is also Healthcare Improvement Scotland and Healthcare Inspectorate Wales as well. They actually regulate online clinics, so the prescribing end of those things that actually employ doctors or nurses, and that's very specific. We do pharmacy and we do the pharmacy professionals, and they regulate those online clinics where there are doctors or nurses. And then not strictly a regulator, but the NHS. Obviously, if you are providing distance selling services and you happen to be contracted with the NHS, there will be a whole load of requirements and specifications which you need to adhere to. So whilst it looks like a lot, we all have our very specific remits. Next slide, please. Okay, and then so what I also want to do is just really highlight to you our regulatory framework, how we actually look at distance selling pharmacies and the things that we actually refer to. And there's 3 documents on there for very good reason. There's the standards for registered pharmacies, which you'll all be aware of. This is what pharmacies have to meet every day. They're the 26 standards under the 5 principles that cover governance through from the pharmacy team to the premises, the actual quality of those services, and then obviously any devices or equipment that is used in that delivery. Now, the standards for registered pharmacies apply to all pharmacies in whatever setting. The difference is they just have to be applied to that different setting. And that's something that you're going to hear about as we go through this presentation, that context is very important and understanding the context. So these have to be applied, and they're there to try and make sure that pharmacies deliver safe and effective care. But in those pharmacies, which is the second document, the standards for pharmacy professionals also apply, because there will be pharmacists and pharmacy technicians who are providing and part of some of that pharmacy team. Those are the 9 professional standards that you know that you're accountable for, but they don't sit in isolation, is the point that I really wanted to make. And you'll see this in action when we tell you some of the stuff that's come out of the inspections. So they both work and they're both complementary to each other. So where the system fails, hopefully the professionals which are working within the system will pick up and mitigate any of the risks to patient safety. Alternatively, if the professional standards fail, then hopefully the point is that the system itself will actually mitigate against any risk to the patient safety. So the thing I want to leave you with is that they don't work in isolation, they are both work together. And then the third document, which is particularly relevant to registered pharmacies who provide services at a distance online, is that guidance, which we published in April 2019. And what that actually does, it just sets out in more detail the sort of expectations and more detail of how you can meet our standards. So this is the regulatory umbrella which we've been using when we've been inspecting online. Next slide, please. And then my last one is really to set the scene really for the way that we regulate, is really just to say that this is our philosophy. So whilst we have to produce standards and then we can also produce guidance, we also have our philosophy, which is our vision for 2030. We actually published this in December 2019, before the pandemic, and it really sets out the way in which we want to regulate over the next 10 years. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because you will start to see some of this in action as we go through the presentation. So it sort of sets the scene for it. And our vision really is in 2030 that there will be safe and effective pharmacy care at the heart of healthier communities. And there's three main limbs to it. It's only one page. It is actually on our website, so I'm not going to say very much about it, but please do go and have a look. We are still about assurance, but very much also about supporting continuous improvement in pharmacy and supporting you to deliver safe and effective care. So that does mean that we do both of those things, and we're not just about minimum standards. But it also does mean that we want to regulate fairly and proportionately, but also that we want to actually, and we will act swiftly where we think there are significant risks to patient safety, or where public confidence may be undermined. The second element of it is really that we want to be more of an anticipatory and proportionate in our approach to regulation. And what we mean by that is getting ahead of issues happening in the first place, so that we can try and minimize their impact and stop them becoming bigger problems. It also means that we will be more intelligence informed. So we will also start to use that to inform the way that we work, be more strategic, more tailored, so that one size doesn't fit all. And that also we will use things like communication as a powerful regulatory tool. And the reason, again, I'm mentioning that is because actually Steph and Andrew will actually be talking in more detail about some of these things. So, and the last one really is just operating as a professional lean organisation, is just to tell you that actually to deliver those, we ourselves know that we need to be more dynamic as an organisation. And the one that I want to pick out from there is to say that we know very well you're now starting to deliver a much broader range of clinical services out there. We ourselves know that means we need to increase our skill base to ensure that we actually are able to reflect the skills and the services which are actually provided by you. Next slide, please. So I've got 2 slides left, and we're now moving into starting to set the scene for the insights and the learning that we've had. And I just wanted to start off by a quote which our chief exec actually made when we published our Learning from Inspection report, which was an analysis of over 14,000 inspections of pharmacies over the last few years. And the reason that I'm highlighting this is because these themes will reoccur throughout the whole of this presentation. And what he actually said was that we know from carrying out thousands of inspections, that was 14,500 inspections, that pharmacies will only perform well for their standards and owners if they actually assure themselves that they have the right governance in place, that systems are in place, and the right culture being really important, and that they're investing in their staff. And if all of these are actually in place, then pharmacies tend to deliver good and excellent services, both for the patients, but also for the public who are using their services. Governance, systems and culture and staff are going to be recurring themes as we go through. So last slide for me. This is a very busy slide, but actually when you get a copy of it, we thought it might be helpful for you. And I'm only going to highlight one little bit of this, but this slide sets out from all of that learning for any type of pharmacy, the themes, the patterns and the trends which you might be interested in. So the one I'm going to focus on is the middle column, which is patterns, and the first purple box, which says key drivers of performance. And what I want to highlight to you in particular, that 1.1, standard 1.1, standard 1.2 and standard 4.2 of our registered pharmacy standards. So that's about identification of risk, and that's the review and monitoring of that and the quality of services, and also then it flows through to the quality of services in 4.2, are absolutely the 3 standards that for every pharmacy that didn't meet all of the standards, these were the ones that they actually failed. So they occur again and again and again. So if you get these wrong, starting with risk, then it will lead to other problems within the system of the actual pharmacy. The other three that sit underneath it, 2.2, 2.4 and 4.3, are when all of those are in place for all the well-performing pharmacies, they were good at 1.1, 1.2 and 4.2, but they were then really good by adding in the people. So for 2.2, the right qualified amount of staff, the culture in the pharmacy is 4.3, then led through to those quality of services. So for all of the good and excellent pharmacies, all of these 6 standards of the pharmacy standards were actually good. And as we go through the rest of this presentation, you'll actually see how some of these themes for online distance selling pharmacies start to reoccur. So I'm now going to hand over to Stephanie, who's going to take us through the next section. Over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Claire. Can I have the next slide, please, Ashley? Thank you. So, as you'll be aware now, we've been publishing inspection reports on the GPhC Pharmacy Inspection website since April 2019. And again, this links into our vision of being transparent and communicating both with members of the public, but also pharmacy sector professionals as well. So on that website, there's about 2,900 reports now. So there's a whole host of information that's available. And it can be searched as well. So if you want to search by location or a pharmacy type, or even pharmacies that aren't meeting all the standards, then there are various search criteria that you can use. Next slide, please, Ashley. So an important part of the website is an area called the Knowledge Hub. So the inspection team not only publish the inspection reports that we write, but also we identify areas of notable practice when we're doing our inspections, and we publish these as short 3 to 4 minute bite-sized pieces of information that other pharmacies can use as learning opportunities. So there's about 270 examples there on the Knowledge Hub, and you can see by the slide that you can again filter that by a particular standard or even pharmacy type as well. So you could filter that by internet or distance selling pharmacy if you wish. But again, there's a common theme that a lot of the information there can be sort of copied in pharmacies, whatever sort of scenario that you're working in. So it's worth a mention here that during the pandemic, the inspectors have been working very, very hard with pharmacies in identifying areas of notable practice with regard to COVID. So there are about 140 examples of coronavirus notable practice. So that's where pharmacies have made a positive change in the way that they work for their patients. And again, it can be a learning opportunity for other pharmacies as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of notable practice, if you were to change the search criteria for internet or distance selling pharmacies, that's the type of report that you'd come up with. It tells you which particular standard that's notable practice for, and it can be one or more. It gives you an example why that's notable practice and what the pharmacy did to actually create that piece of notable practice, which can either be replicated if it's good practice or learnt from if it's not meeting the standards. Next slide, please. So also on our inspection report website, there is a section around learning from enforcement action. So as you'll be aware, one of the tools that we have as inspectors is the statutory enforcement action from either improvement notices or conditions on pharmacies. So this is an example here of a search for internet pharmacies or distance selling pharmacies that have enforcement on them. And again, if you click on the details section there, you'll be able to see both the improvement notice or the conditions notice, plus the inspection report, which includes the evidence to kind of go through that to see where other pharmacies haven't been meeting the standards and learn from those in your own pharmacies or your own practice. Next slide, please. So this is a really important piece of our regulatory activity, and this is linked to our Vision 2030. And it's about proactively using communication and engagement to empower and educate people that use pharmacies. So back in March 2020, GPhC partnered with 10 other healthcare organisations, both regulators but also professional bodies, to produce 6 key points for members of the public who are wanting to engage with online pharmacy services or healthcare providers to be able to do that safely. So a YouGov survey showed that about 12% of the people that they surveyed had obtained medicines online, and about 25% of people would do that in the future. So it's something that is a very, very growing area. Next slide, please. So welcome to the future, this starts off with, but we're there now. So online and distance selling pharmacies are a very, very fast moving, or were already a very, very fast moving area of pharmacy. And the pandemic has accelerated the way that people sort of have been looking at alternative and different ways to interact with both pharmacy services and healthcare services. And it was already a very fast moving area with major advances in sort of automation, technology, information technology anyway. It's important to remember that medicines aren't ordinary items of commerce and therefore shouldn't be treated as such. And that includes the sale or supply of medicines online. And that also includes online prescribing services, whether that's a CQC registered service or a pharmacist-led service in a distance selling pharmacy or partnered with a bricks and mortar pharmacy. So the pace of change coupled with the immature and evolving systems can be the perfect storm. However, change and innovation isn't a bad thing if the people involved really understand the risks and are prepared to adapt and change the direction and the course as they learn more, as there certainly are benefits to the people who access the services in that way. Next slide, please. So action to date. So as Claire mentioned earlier, there are some pharmacies that haven't got it quite right, and they haven't had robust governance in place when we have been and inspected them. But it's important to take this information here with some context. Again, linked to our vision, we've been using an anticipatory and risk-based approach to how we prioritise inspections. So a lot of the distance selling and online pharmacies that we have inspected, as well as some bricks and mortar pharmacies actually, were linked to online prescribing services. And those online prescribing services, there was a risk because they were supplying high-risk medicines. And high-risk medicines in this context are your sort of opioids and Z drugs, as well as some other medicines such as antibiotics or modafinil. So we have carried out 78 online pharmacy inspections, and those reports are published online, of which there have been 49 in sort of statutory enforcement notices issued. So 40 of those are conditions and 9 of those are improvement notices, as well as some of the pharmacy professionals and owners referred to fitness to practice. Next slide, please. And my last slide before I hand over to Andrew is just a hotspot map, which shows that these are where the pharmacies are based that have improvement notices or conditions. So it just demonstrates that there's no particular pattern. There's slight hotspots around London, the West Midlands and Manchester, but actually it affects the whole of England, but also Scotland and Wales as well. So thank you, and I'll hand over to Andrew.
Thanks, Steph. Next slides, please, Ashley. Thanks, Steph, again. And so in the next couple of slides, we'll be talking about the context, or putting these insights that we shared and we discussed in the statistics that we presented to you into context. As we mentioned, this is a fast pace of change, i.e. the bricks and mortar sort of model of pharmacy service is not the only way that public can access pharmacy services. It takes many shapes and forms, including the prescribing services or supplying pharmacy service through a distance selling pharmacy. It is clearly innovation. It is not only the future, or when we thought about digital health to be sort of targeted a specific gap or challenges to the health system or to the health system market, it's not only targeting a gap now, it is actually the market, or it is the solution to a lot of health system challenges. So it is innovation. some of the examples, you might see that this could be disruptive innovation, and in some of them is slightly a bit immature. Putting things in context, we're talking about the first point of insight is about clinical services being delivered as a transactional supply function. In these clinical services, the most focused example that we're focusing on is providing online services through a pharmacy or an online pharmacy service. Is still not, the system is not getting the culture right, and this is what Duncan and Claire sort of highlighted, is I'm still working out the same system as I'm dispensing and supplying with a green prescription. That transition to understanding what model of service hasn't happened. And when you see that, when you're coming into inspection, or when you see that, you would expect that actually, if the culture is not right, definitely or certainly they wouldn't meet the GPhC standards. The second insight is about significant technology, heavy technology-enabled operating models, but what we found out is not well understood by those working in them, and that could be due to lack of integration, lack of understanding how a model, a prescribing service model based on a questionnaire, how the IT-back system inform or how they work with the clinical teams. There is lack of integration between that. The IT system does not understand the clinical requirement, and people aren't using this system to generate the sort of reports or to help them to actually look at how the questionnaires are like, quality reports, auditing reports, and sort of monitoring and so on. The other insight is about weak leadership and governance, and that's including minimal understanding and sometimes actually lack of understanding of clinical governance. Of the whole pillars of clinical governance, starting from auditing the service to learning from mistakes and incident reporting to staff development and management, you find the leadership that does not have the support tools for the staff in terms of a good governance to govern this new model of service or this new service being provided. And that's will lead us to what we found is poor risk management. And that's, again, tallying up with the pattern of our standards 1.1, 1.2, 4.2, which is mainly targeted governance arrangement around service and quality systems. So if you didn't get the culture right, you did not understand the model that you are providing, and you haven't done that transition, you have not got good clinical governance in place to identify risks and know exactly what risks to the public, risk of the medium, risk of the patients or the users using this online service, and risk of the medicines that you are prescribing. You will definitely poorly manage the risks. And that's the consequences are obvious: disregard of safeguarding of vulnerable people or systems, inadequate indemnity. So you wouldn't be able to understand your actually service that you're providing. Hence, you're still not sure how to indemnify, or not sure if you've got the right indemnity to cover the additional services that you provide. Another thing is about lack of whole systems view professional operating in, which we talked about. Is there is so many models in terms of how you get the prescribing service, either something attached to a brick and mortar, a pharmacy integrated in-house team in terms of non-medical prescribers, or could be medics working in the pharmacy, or sometimes we've seen models where it's outsourced to a third-party prescribing service that is sort of, there are some sort of service level agreement between them and the pharmacy. In some instances, some systems or some pharmacy would use EU registered healthcare, but they're not based in the UK. And here comes the issues about due diligence and making sure that actually these non-UK medics or practitioners, are they practicing within UK-based guidelines to provide service to UK-based patients? Are they regulated by UK, like sort of regulatory, like we discussed about CQC or HIS or equivalent in Wales? So this is understanding the whole system. Could be lack of understanding of that system, could be conscious, unconscious, we found example, but it's definitely blindness of the virtual settings and the full operating model. The other thing is about increasing use of clinical and experienced pharmacy professionals. Mainly, or the majority would be non-medical prescribers, independent pharmacist prescribers in particular, and then with a lack of support from the leadership and the governance to provide support tool in terms of managing the scope of practice, or having support tools and having peer review in terms of making sure that these prescribers are prescribing with the competency and the confidence in terms of a non-medical prescribing policy, or making sure that they've got, they are prescribing, or their prescribing is monitored and reviewed, and it is within their scope of practice. This also reflects in poor record keeping. And poor record keeping is sort of the common theme in all of the governance pillars. It does make you or provide the data for you needed to audit your service to ensure the quality. It makes you investigate your incidents properly. It also makes you identify gaps in your team skills and how you built on that. So poor record keeping, because again, the culture is not yet, it's not just a PMR, it's not just a dispensing system. This is a holistic care you're providing from seeing the patient, consulting with the patient, seeing through them until delivering the medication to the door. And another thing is about breakdown of practical application of pharmacy and professional standards. And this is what Claire highlighted, that these are standards for pharmacy premises or for pharmacy owners, plus professionals, pharmacy professionals, the GPhC standards. They should interplay and they should work together. But what we found is, again, conscious or unconscious breakdown of these practical applications. And that's definitely led to poor professional judgment from the professionals. The last thing is we're talking about imbalance. And in here I'm referring or mapping to one of the standards, the standard 2.6, talking about incentives and targets, which shouldn't compromise health of the public and the service provided, as well as the professional judgments of the people working on that. But what we find that sometimes these incentives or targets are actually driving the model, which is lacking patient focused and is stepping towards more commercial, more corporate, more business structure, rather than actually focusing on the care that we're providing. Next slide, please. And again, just bringing up some or keeping you up to date with this is not online, this is not relating to online pharmacy, but this is some of the issues that were picked up from the sector, especially during our intelligent-led campaigns during the pandemic, with regards to excessive ordering or excessive sales of codeine linctus. So we carried out a routine intelligent-led inspection of pharmacy. We found inappropriate sort of practices that does not meet our standards and required enforcement actions. We imposed 18 conditions and we referred 17 pharmacy professional to fitness to practice panels. Next, please. Again, a context, adding a context to the insight. And you would see now, when Claire was talking and Steph talking about transferability, regardless of the service that you provide, if you provide a more complex, holistic service like an online prescribing, or you providing an OTC over-the-counter, things still goes wrong because of the specific reasons that we mentioned. And you can draw a lot, this is for us to reflect, we can draw a lot of similarities between what happened in the online pharmacy and what could happen in just selling an OTC item or medicine over the counter. But they're the same. Culture, high-risk medicine liable to misuse like codeine and abuse are being supplied over the counter in a simple transaction way. Again, no safeguards, no understanding of actually the model or the service being provided. We're seeing weak leadership and governance popping in again. That's including lack of monitoring or review of the ordering. So the system or the SI or the pharmacy owner does not know how much codeine is being ordered. And that's, again, how much codeine is being sold. And is this appropriate? Is 100 codeine a week is appropriate to sell? What is it driving this sort of sales? Couple that with insufficient oversight, because normally OTC medicines would be supplied by counter pharmacy staff, and the oversight from the responsible pharmacist was minimal in these circumstances. It's not only the oversight of the responsible pharmacist, there wasn't any governance arrangement or procedure to govern the sales or provide a structure to, to the sales of the codeine linctus or high-risk medicines. Again, lack of governance, lack of identification of risk, lack of understanding of the model, poor risk management by not being able to flag up that these are high-risk medicines, possibly or perhaps provided to high-risk cohort of patients or vulnerable member of the public. So again, there is disregard of safeguarding. The other thing is about keeping up to date as an awareness. First of all, the clinical knowledge of the pharmacy. Why codeine linctus is still being used? Is it still first line? Is it best practice to use it? The other thing is about being aware about what's going in the world. We're talking about the opioid crisis worldwide. We're talking about here and there. There are actions, there are media, there are regulatory movements about codeine and vulnerability of patients using opioids, weak opioids. Also about current trends about mixing and possibly codeine itself when it's sold with another sedative like antihistamines, promethazine or cyclizine. That should click about, raise some red flags in terms of if I would dispense on a regular customer basis or supply these medicines. So picking up these trends. And again, the same breakdown of practical application of pharmacy and professional standards, resulting in the same result: poor professional judgments and not taking into account or ignoring the appropriateness of making a sale. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide, and this is just all brings it together and provides sort of some quality insight. We're moving now from the negative images. We're given sort of like recipe for the quality, or how to get things right, through our insight and through the inspection and through our sort of our data analysis. And as we can see from the example of the Cudine link test and the model of prescribing online pharmacy, it is transferable, it is applicable, whether on these services or any new services to come in the future. So if you're considering this sort of insight as quality, as a takeaway message, leadership and establishing the right culture from the beginning of understanding the model that you're providing, filtering through a good governance, including good clinical governance, upholding the principles or the pillars of the clinical governance, auditing, risk management. That will enable you to be able to identify the risk and assess the risk of the model that you're providing, of the service users, of the type of medicines, of your staff capability and skills, and effectively risk manage this. Again, working with technology, it is a beast to be tamed, but it's not only the future now, I think is the present. So technology is the way forward, digital health is the way forward. But we need to make that technology work for us, work for our system, actually come in and provide, fill in the gaps that sort of other normal procedures wouldn't fill, and actually provide the clinical decision-making tools. And the last two bits are actually addressing the professionals, so pharmacists, pharmacy technician, pharmacy staff, is confidence. You should have confidence in raising concerns to your internal channel whistleblowing policies in your local and national sort of area, as well as our GPhC, if you think that there is a breakdown of the practical application of either the pharmacy premises or the pharmacy owner standards or other professional standards. And this is your professional responsibility. You should meet, as a pharmacy professional, the GPhC professional standards for professional pharmacists or pharmacy technician, and the practical application, and also understanding how the regulatory frameworks in terms of third party, are the CQC third party, for example, prescribing services, are they registered with CQC, where they're working from, and just having a bit of a oversight of what regulatory frameworks and more regulators. And that's me. Thank you. I'll hand over to Claire, and next slide.
Hi, so I think we're going to go forward to Jasmine now, actually.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And thank you to Stephanie and Andrew as well. It's been a very informative, a lot of insights and learnings, very informative all around. So thank you for changing the slides there. Ashley, could I ask you to go back one slide, please, if you don't mind? Oops. I think I'm missing a slide. Okay, not to worry. Let's move on to the next one. And just want to say alongside it that in addition to some of the information that we have published for members, one of the key pieces of information is what we call providing online pharmacy services safely, an overview fact sheet, which we have developed sort of drawing on from the guidance for providing pharmacies services at a distance, which is the GPhC guidance, as well as looking at where things go wrong sometimes and where claims can happen, when things have gone wrong. And the key areas of concern from what we have identified generally is actually links in very nicely to what Claire was highlighting as the key areas as well, where if something goes wrong with those three particular standards in the principle, that's where things go wrong, which is a failure to conduct appropriate risk assessment of the type of medicines and services that are going to be provided from that pharmacy in particular, as well as ensuring having proper governance procedures in place, implementing appropriate safeguards before high-risk medicines are prescribed and dispensed in particular. And one of the key areas is not contacting the patient's regular GP when medicines are supplied online. Also, so what we have done is summarize the key areas of where concerns arise in this fact sheet, as well as the key steps or key action points. We call it top tips, action points to ensure that how to correct those areas. Make sure you conduct a risk assessment properly. Make sure proper governance procedures are in place, such as patient ID identification, verification. Record keeping is an absolute must, because a good record keeping will also help management of any potential concerns, claims, or complaints arising, and it really helps support the whole process in particular. So it's available on the NPA website to download for members. Alongside it, what the NPA has also done in the last year is set up an online pharmacies group forum, so to speak. Now, the last meeting of the group was held for members with an online pharmacy. Sorry, next slide, please, Ashley. Sorry. The last time the group met was in September 2019, and that's the slide. For members with an online pharmacy offering services inside or outside of the NHS or private services. And the whole purpose of the group, where members meet in this group, is to share best practice, really, understand what the regulation is surrounding providing pharmacies services at a distance, especially online pharmacies, and discussion between how to maintain good standards in delivering services in this manner. And the NPA is host for this group, I would say. So any members who currently are operating with an online pharmacy model and would like to join future discussions, please do get in touch, and we can share some information with you, as well as information about the next meeting, etc. Thank you. Next slide, please, Ashley. Thank you. So just to highlight, I mean, we have over the years published multiple updates for our members who may be operating these sort of pharmacy models. So the fact sheet that I was mentioning to you about providing online pharmacies safely, on the right-hand image on this slide, you can see an extract, an image literally, which is just covering some of the brief notes about the safeguards to put in place, etc. On the left-hand side of this, you can see one of our latest patient safety updates that we issued recently, and that is again re-highlighting all the important bits about providing online pharmacy services safely, continuing to highlight the areas where things go wrong, how to ensure that where the relevant information is available from the GPhC, including the additional FAQs the GPhC has recently published to help clarify elements of that guidance, etc., as well as information from the NPA. So this is available on the NPA website. This particular update, we have actually made it freely available for everyone to access. It's not for members only, so you don't even need to log in to access this latest update. So please do avail yourselves of that. Thank you. Next slide, please, Ashley. So here are just some of the links to some of our most recent updates. I've only included the ones in the last sort of few ones and a selection of them. There are many others going back over the years. But these are quite helpful, and they will be available on the NPA website. Thank you. Next, please, Ashley. So ultimately, the pharmacy services team is available to help answer questions. So we are contacted regularly by many members, either because they already operate an online pharmacy and they want to discuss further the GPhC standards or what they're doing, or just have a discussion with us. They also come through with many indemnity queries in terms of cover for online pharmacies, and our NPA insurance team can advise regarding that, depending on the particular types of services you're offering, etc. And also, excuse me, if you want to run anything through or ask us any information about the information resources that we published, etc., please do advise us, do contact us. We are open Monday to Saturday, etc. Thank you, Ashley. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I think we missed a couple in between because, yes, just wanting to highlight the NHS England Community Pharmacy webinar taking place on Thursday evening between 6 and 7 to join in. I think it's going to be highly, highly useful for everyone. But next thing we want to do is actually move on to the Q&A session next. So if you could move on to that, actually, that would be helpful. So just to get the ball rolling, and if anybody has any questions to ask of the GPhC team or myself, then please use the Q&A functionality at the moment to ask any questions in there. So if I can get the ball rolling, we have had one or two questions sort of come through initially to us. And if I can just ask the GPhC team to advise on that, that would be quite helpful. And this is with regards to the assuring the public that if they are purchasing or seeking to purchase medicines from an online pharmacy, and the need for the MHRA logo and the registration with the MHRA, could you just cover that a little bit briefly alongside with the GPhC's own logo, of course, that is available for pharmacies to display on their website, which gives assurance that this is a registered pharmacy, etc. Please, thank you.
Okay, shall I kick off with this one, and then I'll let Andrews if they want to add anything else. So yes, you're quite right. There are two logos at the moment. So the MHRA logo is the EU logo, which when we leave at the end of this year will no longer be valid. So that is a mandatory. So that is a mandatory logo. And the GPhC logo is actually a voluntary logo, which we do ask pharmacies to actually have, so that actually on our register people are able to actually identify that. But that's the main difference.
No, that's very helpful. And of course, with the EU logo, we are very rapidly approaching 1st of January, aren't we? It seems like we are on a very fast moving train at the moment. So quite interesting. You mentioned, of course, that once we leave the EU formally at the end of the year, or rather 1st January, that it will no longer be valid. So presumably, the ones who are using it at the moment may continue to have it potentially, because I think this is the area that is, I suppose, also contacting the MHRA to see how things are changing, isn't it? When the transition comes to an end.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they will know more than we do, and I think it's a very fast field.
Yeah.
My understanding is that we shouldn't be able to use it if we exit obviously without a deal. It just depends what happens in the next few weeks. So I think it's a question of us waiting to see.
Of course. And then the GPhC logo being voluntary at the moment, are there plans to change anything along those lines once the EU logo is no longer suitable to be used?
So I would say the GPhC logo is going to continue. It isn't predicated on us being in Europe or not. But I think in many ways, as an interim, it's actually even more important. There is a reason that we have to act within our rules, and our rules don't allow us, because of the EU logo, to make that permanent and a mandatory requirement. So, and for us to do that, we have to get our rules changed. So it is a potential, and it will be on the list, but that's for government to change our rules. So our voluntary logo does not change at all. And to a certain extent, the standards to which people have been operating to do not change at all either, whether we leave with a deal or without. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful, because that is a degree of assurance for patients, definitely. And I would be something that certainly when we speak with members, we do say to them, yes, it's voluntary, but it's good to use, basically. To try and use it. So that I think our recommendation would continue on that front, even though the EU logo becomes no longer mandatory, in fact not to be used, but it would be good to use the GPhC logo, and if and when in the future that changes and becomes more compulsory, then obviously watch that space.
Yeah, we would absolutely encourage people to remain and to, if they don't have it, that they offer services online to carry on doing that.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Sorry, Andrew, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just nodding, sorry.
No, thank you very much for that. So that's very, very helpful as well. Now, if I may also just ask something else or a little bit further. So in terms of the patterns which are noticed in terms of which particular bits that perhaps online service providers struggle with, which is 1.1, 1.2, 4.2. Now, 1.1 is the risk assessment and risk management one. I'm trying to very rapidly recall my memory, as you can see. Because even though I read them frequently enough, I obviously don't remember the exact wording on them. And then 1.2 is to do with the safety and quality of pharmacy services being regularly reviewed and monitored. Now, that would be quite important, when new services are introduced in particular. So when I'm looking at it from providing services at a distance, we've had a massive year this year, haven't we? Where a lot of pharmacies, and one of the things that I was hoping that you might sort of want to cover between the three of you a little bit is your recent publication about remote consultations and the high-level principles that have been published. So we had something, just in early November, which I think can be potentially linked to this because, you are delivering that in a slightly different way to normal.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to say one thing and then I think I'm going to pass over to Andrew for the remote consultation.
Brilliant.
And just to say, I'm glad you said about risk and that actually it was about an ongoing risk assessment. And I'm really glad you said that because it shouldn't, when you are delivering services, those reviews should actually be ongoing and proactive. So if anything changes, you need to look at it again. If you're delivering more services and you're adding on different services, you do need to relook at it. So please do keep that as a regular thing. It should not be seen as a one-off tick box that you then put up on the shelf. It's absolutely fundamental.
Yeah, and Andrew, before you come in, if I could just add to what Claire has just said. So as a means of an example, we seem to be on the verge potentially of a COVID vaccine becoming available. And, everybody I'm sure must have been glued to the news, or I'm just giving myself away now, in the last couple of days in particular, seeking any bit of information as well as watching out for information coming. Now, like when the flu service comes around every year in September, which is a service you then provide for an X number of months. And this year in particular, it has been had to have so many considerations, isn't it, surrounding infection control and managing numbers in the pharmacy and all that. And that is where the risk assessment to start providing the vaccination services again, after a period of time when a lot of pharmacies had stopped injecting people effectively, if I can put it bluntly, is where those risk assessments came into play. And we've certainly developed templates and risk assessments as well to help members to think through all the different bits that they should be thinking about. But another time I can see that happening or having really good relevance is a potential introduction of a COVID vaccine administration service through community pharmacy. Yeah. Would you say? So I think that literally, I would say, ties in with 1.1 and 1.2 quite clearly there, would be, identifying the risks associated with it, which could be things like staffing levels, capacity, PPE, all sorts of things. How will you maintain your other services and review and monitor what happens with your other services as well, potentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I think for us, there's just one word that goes with all of that, and that is context. Because you have to consider the context of your pharmacy, the size of it, your staff, the services that you actually deliver, and you have to decide then whether it's appropriate to do so, even if it is legal to do so, or you are able to do so. Shall we ask Andrew just to come
Yes,
in?
I was thinking that. Thank you very much, Andrew.
So a comment on about the high level of standards that you referred to when talking about different regulators or regulatory bodies come together and provide sort of key standards about digital health. So again, it is a growing market, and it is a growing service, and there are codes of practices in terms of how you provide a consultation, how you run a consultation, whether through the provided through NHS Digital or NHSX in terms of consultation tools and how you could apply that. This has taken us from the first thing is about identity checks, about the barriers of the model, that you don't know who you're dealing with in terms of the patient, in terms of credit card information, or all of these various models. And there are certain sort of reference to different sort of systems that can be used. Coming to the build up about the consultation and recognizing actually the risks of the medium that they're using is not the typical someone sat in front of you and you've got all the access to their medical records through sort of an NHS sort of umbrella. You can physical examine, you can like the body language of the patient as well, even if they're unspoken words, and relying on a questionnaire model to pick up these sort of normal consultation, I think needs a lot of work, and it needs a lot of understanding of the technology provided, as well as the service users, people. The way you actually advertise for medicine, whether you talked about the MHRA regulations, and the way that the users will navigate through the website is important too. What we were trying to highlight in our presentation, our insights, they all transferable. So if you're providing a COVID vaccine, you're still using these quality insights and making sure that you've got leadership, you've got governance, you've got risk assessments, whether the environment, whether does that mean that you would identify sort of risks of other vulnerable patients using the same service? If you're doing a diagnostic service, like forwards and moving forward with NHS long-term plans, and I'm talking about outside independent health on a private basis, there will be more opportunities for pharmacies to take on regular review of repeat prescriptions, SMRs, other diagnostic bits and pieces. So that's, again, you can take, it is transferable. The governance is still there. You need auditing, you need quality management system, you need to meet 1.1, you need to meet 1.2, you need to meet 4.2. Another thing is, if part of the service is provided third party, you just need to exercise your due diligence, making sure that the third party is following whatever regulation they are under. If they're diagnostic, they're following the diagnostic regulation. If they're providing a sort of a clinical treatment services, they are registered or they are regulated by a body. Another thing is could be with the service level agreement between these parts, that you know their performance, you know their KPIs, you know their quality performance, and a shared learning platforms when incidents or when things go wrong, how we share that between these different people providing the same service.
Oh, that's very helpful, Andrew. I think one of the key things also that you mentioned, in terms of the particularly doing these consultations at a distance is the identity checks. I think that tends to worry a lot of pharmacies, to be honest. So do you have any specific insights on what good looks like from ID checks perspective?
I think in our distance, I say distance learning, in our guidance for pharmacy owner for providing distance service, we linked to sort of the NHS or what the digital code of practice. Yes. I think we could not advise, because there are a variety of companies and there are a variety of systems to be used to provide identity checks. But and it's down to the organisation or the pharmacy to look at which one suits their model. So there won't be specific advices, but there are clear guidance and professional guidance out there from people expert in that matter that tells you exactly what you need to do and what you can aim for, and they're wide ranging.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful, and thank you again for that as well. And I think that actually brings us nicely to 8:30. I think we've done very well on time. And so may I just say thank you very, very much, first of all, for joining us this evening. Claire, Andrew, Stephanie, it's been very insightful, definitely. And we also get these questions quite frequently as a team, and it's been a good learning for us as well, dare I say. So it's been very helpful on that front. Just also wanted to thank our lovely events team who helps us manage the webinars every time, which is Simon and Ashley. We've done many webinars together, and they're absolutely brilliant and really support us through the entire process. So huge thank you. And of course, very, very big thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. We realize this week is quite busy in terms of the NPA conference, and you have a large selection of webinars to choose from. So thank you for joining us for this evening in particular. And once again, thank you. I do hope that we have the opportunity to have you present with us again, Claire, Andrew, and Stephanie. I think in the future that would be quite helpful. I'm sure there's plenty other topics to sort of provide insights on apart from services at a distance. So thank you very much, and lovely to have you with us this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.